Hello, my friends. Today we are talking about independence from SaaS. So hopefully you can see me. The Montana sunlight is just wild this morning. Independence from SaaS. So this conversation is giving you the opportunity to understand what is your rights, right? Like, what is your rights as a user? And just give me a thumbs up or something. Let me know if you can see me okay and hear me okay. That's always very helpful. Good morning. So the goal of this conversation is just to make sure that you really understand what your rights are as a client, as a business, and remembering that big SaaS, big consulting, big tech in general is going to profit off of your confusion. So the goal of this conversation, and as a reminder, I always put these on my YouTube channel. So you can find me on YouTube, same handle. If you want to rewatch them, if you want to share them, to get your nitro cold brew out of here. Can you make that at home? It's like a serious question. Or do you have to buy it at the store for, $90 a cup? But again, good morning. Glad to see you guys. Happy Wednesday. Here in our office, we'll have Thursday, Friday off for the holiday. That's not required, but it's certainly something that I hope you guys have as well. You can, but it's a little more involved. It's like creating matcha at home, right? I tried to learn how to do that, and I was like, hell no, I don't have all these tools. I don't know what this means, and that type of thing. So, it's definitely a big thing. But I think what we want to talk about here is kind of how you look at what your rights are as a client, right? What are your rights in these types of conversations, and how do you protect yourself? And that's the whole point of my channel, right? Is you have the right to this sort of access. Big SaaS is going to make you feel super confused, so you need to pay them in order to understand how technology can make your business successful. And that's not the case at all. But their model is to confuse you, which is why I want to give you all this information. Exactly. Revolution against SaaS. I love that. And that's what we should be doing. And I'm like so serious when I say that, because it is that deep, right? It is taking away dollars from your business, and the businesses that are actually affected by this are not the billion-dollar enterprise that have this excess budget, right? They're the mid-market businesses or the small businesses that are completely taken advantage because they're sold this idea by a billion-dollar marketing machine that this is how they grow, right? Like, this is how they get to the next level. They need to unlock this software, and that's not the case whatsoever. It's really, it's a case in which people are made to think that they're not smart enough to make that decision on their own, and that couldn't be further from the case. So let's get into it. So I think we're going to talk about a few different kind of pathways here. We've got lock-in, right? And looking at what that really looks like, lock-in and risk. And then we've got licenses and excess waste. So how are we making sure that we're not buying too much? And then we've got like the AI tokens and the new kind of hybrid pricing. But that's a kind of the way to look at that. And then I think what I want you guys to take away from this is every technology strategy, process, business is totally different, right? So it doesn't really matter if a vendor comes to you and is like, hey, we've done this before. Should you verify their ability to implement from a technical perspective? It absolutely can be something like that, but it's not something that you need to be able to outsource everything to them. So let's get into it. As a reminder, if you have questions, definitely put them in the comments or anything like that. So I think what's the alternative? FOSS, I guess. Is that freedom as a service software? Is that what that means? I love that. is it free and open source software? I think that's what the industry term stands for. But I wouldn't advocate for an open source software for most of my clients because it's too much for them to manage. And it actually leads into greater lock-in because your integrations are so fragile that you need certain products in order to stay healthy, like, right, to be able to even utilize that. And so I think what the understanding is there is something like an Odoo, open source ERP, or microservices or things like that. They sound good, right? But they lack a lot of standardization, and they actually take a lot of IT maturity to be able to handle. And I think that's why they're sold in this kind of like cheap alternative. And that's not really what they are. They can be cheap as an entry point, but it's just like everything else. Then all of a sudden we're paying $100 a month instead of $30 because we need all of these excess modules, and it's, taking our team's mind share to put that together. So let's talk more about that, though. If you have more questions about it, definitely let me know. So when it comes to, are all SaaS vendors trying to trap you? I think trap is an aggressive word, but ultimately yes, because that's their business model, is to get you on as many contracts as they can, right? Because that's how they make more revenue off of you, and then make it very difficult for you to leave because they don't want a lot of churn. They want a sticky customer. Churn costs them money. So from their point of view, yes, absolutely, they're trying to keep you in their ecosystem. I think probably a macro example of this would be like SAP, right? And we even see, many SAP court cases and litigation against them for openly doing this in the marketplace, where they have something like, the Signavio case study is a great example of this, where they go in, right? They have you on a legacy SAP system, and then all of the sudden you want to switch, or you want to bring in a new process intelligence tool like Signavio to utilize something, and they block your data. Like, they straight up block your data, which you think, that sounds illegal. And it's like, no, it's unfortunately not illegal. It's, you signed the contract, you're in their platform, and so it's really their data, not your data. And that's essentially what they're going back and forth about with Celonis, because SAP has Signavio, which is their process intelligence tool. They want you to use that, right? And so that's kind of how they quote unquote trap you, is they make it too painful and too expensive for you to leave. And that's a big risk, right? So we talked about data, and then they all, it's a huge security issue. Too, is a big consideration in that conversation of how they essentially do that. Now, we got to remember that this is not all like one evil empire over there. We have to be responsible for what we buy in software, right? So if you go in and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, they tricked me, blah, 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 you've got to take some accountability for that, right? Because you read the contract, hopefully. Sometimes you don't, which is wild to me. And you signed it, right? Without red lines, because they rushed you, and they have all kinds of different tactics to get you in the door. Because you have to remember, software as a service, those fees are going to start the minute you sign the contract, right? People don't care if you're utilizing, or vendors don't care if you're utilizing the software. It's absolutely going to be something they start charging you for the minute you sign. So maybe it takes you 18 months to a year to implement. Well, you're going to be paying for a software you're not using, and probably double dipping because you have a certain legacy software that you're either replacing or you're plugging into. So you're going to be paying for two things. So you need to remember that, and when you budget, and make sure that you understand that in the contracts. So I think that's a big conversation as well when it comes to lock-in. I think another piece is, I always tell you, don't use tier 1 software, right? So we're looking at Oracle, SAP. I even try and stay away from Salesforce, right? in those types of things. They're going to be the main people that will lock you in. Now, some businesses need that size of software, right? And that is a whole different story. But 90% of the businesses do not, right? And that's a big conversation in that. And so let's see. Sorry, it's glitching on me here. The other piece. Sorry, it's trying to like promote the live and it's not letting me do anything else. I'm just gonna keep talking, and if you can't hear me, I'm sorry. TikTok is trying to make me like promote the live, but they don't. So, speaking of big tech, it's like, you know, how they kicked me off the other day because I was talking about Oracle. No, I'm just kidding. I doubt that they did that. But what's the incentive for vendors dragging out implementations? I don't think so. So now SIs are paid by go live, especially SAP SIs. So system integrators, I say and those are the people that actually implement your software, right? Those are like the problem areas. As I always say in our remediation projects, if you watched our other live this week, or yesterday, we've just been live like crazy this week. It's 9 times out of 10 is the SI is the problem, right? The system integrator, not so much the software, but how you're implementing it, especially for those bigger ERP, CRM projects, right? MES. So they are paid on go live. So I think quite the opposite. They want to get you live as fast as possible. And then when nothing works, that's their incentive to say, oh, I'm going to charge you all of this extra money to fix your phase 2, right? That's when the change orders start, when after you go live. But because we're on this channel and we're smart enough to know that we're not going to go live just because they want us to, right? We're going to go live when our business is ready for that and we feel like testing is complete. We always say to our clients, especially those in private equity who are obsessed with a go live date or who has fallen into their system integrator spell and gets obsessed with that as well. The go live date is completely fake. It's made up. You could close your eyes and point at the calendar and pick a go live date. It is made up until your testing is finished, right? And that's just a big conversation that is misunderstood and where a lot of people go wrong because, we've got a remediation client right now who somehow everything worked, and this is a lot of our clients, in testing and according to the SI, and nothing works in production, but there's no documentation around the testing, which, I'm not at all trying to accuse people here. I'm just wondering, where is the documentation, right? 100%, oftentimes there are assumptions that are not included in that timeline. Oh, for sure, right? Like, could I train for a marathon in 3 months? Well, probably, right? If I had 8 hours of sleep every single night and I ate nothing but, high protein vegetables and I had, all of these different things. But that's not life, right? Life doesn't work that way. And neither does a messy business. That's why I'm so upset, nerd here, about this off the shelf movement. Like, right, is why are we talking about off the shelf if we know that 90% of the businesses that anyone supports, there's no off the shelf software that's going to fit them. I talk to businesses every single day. They're not even sure if they can do an ERP system because they're so specialized. And a lot of times they can't, right? So what do people need to understand about SaaS vendor incentives? Well, as I always say, like, follow the money. That's all you got to do. And that doesn't mean they're horrible people. You just have to understand how they get paid. So a big mistake, right, or a red flag, whatever you want to call it, when I see clients that are struggling with an implementation, it's because they use the same SI that sold them the software. And this is a little tricky when it comes to who sells you the software. Some big vendors sell their own software. Some do not, right? Microsoft doesn't sell their own software. their D365 program, which is, 9 times out of 10 what you're going to implement if you're looking at an ERP system, is sold by verified resellers, right? And so they have a whole third-party reseller network. Some are really good, some are really bad, right? And that's a big understanding in the industry about like where that works. So you have to remember they're incentivized to sell you the software that's going to make them the most money, not necessarily the whole suite of what they can implement, right? And ideally, they'd right size you, sell it, and then implement it. But that's a huge conflict of interest, right? They sell you the software and implement it because they're getting paid twice. And that doesn't bode well for you in making sure that they're dedicated to your business goals, right? So let's see. Is Odoo gaining traction in North America? I think so. I mean, I think it's... there's been this rise of like Odoo implementations or implementers, I should say, that a lot of businesses have acquired an Odoo implementation, like a bigger system integrator, an implementation wing of their business. And now they're doing that on a bigger level. I wouldn't say we've seen a lot of successful Odoo implementations. Most of the time, we see Odoo implementations that are troubled, right? Because we didn't understand what we were buying. And that's hard with that type of open software because you need, again, a lot of technical maturity to manage something like that. But I think it's gaining traction, especially on its kind of like anti-contract. So Odoo, for the most part, isn't going to lock you in. It's just difficult to manage that type of architecture. Does difficult mean we shouldn't do it? Absolutely not. But it needs to be an understanding of when you implement that. And like our delivery team, they hate to see an Odoo implementation coming because they know it's just going to be a massive mess because this team over here owns this module and this team owns this module and this team owns this module, and they're having trouble making it produce value in the organization because it's like getting everybody to dance together on a dance team, right? It's just hard, right? If you had 5 minutes to talk to a company in the market for a new ERP, what would you tell them? I would tell them, Car Talk today. Car Talk. If any of you actually listen to Car Talk, that was my favorite radio show, but again, aging myself here. I would ask them, do you actually need a new ERP system? A lot of times it's become something in the organization where people don't like it, or the loudest person is like, to be the business of the future, we need Oracle. So if I had 5 minutes to talk to them, I would really drill down into what is the problem with your ERP system? Like, what is the issue with your current system, if you have one? Right? Most of the business I talk to, because we service enterprises and above, usually $1 billion is our clients' revenue. So they likely have an ERP system. I would ask kind of, why do you need something or that big of a change? Because it's going to be a massive, massive change for their overall industry. But what do you guys think, right? SaaS orgs give partner versus provider. They're certainly not a partner. They're a provider. As long as you understand that and make sure that you're managing to that, that's a big thing. So at what point does staying, popped me down. What point does staying on an old legacy system become too big of a risk? I would say, in heavily regulated industries, right? But there's always kind of newer versions of the system. Like we have a client right now that bought a new ERP system. It didn't end up being a good fit for them. It was before we were involved, and they called us because they couldn't figure out why they were struggling so much with the implementation, like rightfully so. Again, this stuff is confusing. And if you have a vendor chirping in your ear and have an SI chirping over here, you're like, what the hell? Like, what actually does any of this mean? And so a lot of times that's where our advocacy work comes in, so that we can really manage that side for you and translate, because it's like a totally different language. And even like the best consultants have done maybe like 30 SAP implementations in their career. They're long, they're hard, they're nasty, right? So It needs to be you need to know that going in. And so I think the biggest risk is going to be, can you stay compliant, right? But this client, their issue with their ERP system was that it was so fragile, it could turn off at any time. Like it could break and they could not fix it. They didn't know how. Because that happens all the time with older legacy systems is, the steward wrote the code for 30 years and now Stuart's retired and everyone's like, well, we'll just use his old code and we have no idea what's happening, right? Because we didn't do a good job of sharing that across the organization. So that's a big risk. But even for them, we were able to go back to their legacy provider and get them new license, right? That could fall under the compliance need. Odoo's biggest problem is the updates and the lack of documentation. I would agree with that. I think they have Stuart. They have a very, again, if you've ever been to their conference in Belgium, like it's super like ravey, like they have a very kind of like whatever anti the man, right, attitude, which I'm all here for, right? But we've still got to be a business, right? We've still got to be we still got to make sure that we're providing a quality product, and we got to be honest, right? If you're keeping all of these modules stringed together, think about it. If you had like a toy train that was stuck together with magnets and you're dragging it through gravel, right? Is it going to stay together? I mean, maybe some of them will stay together, but probably not, right? And that's, what I think of when I think of Odoo, right? And there's ways to make that work. I'm not at all saying there isn't, but you got to be there making sure that you understand what that risk is for your business. And do you have the in-house competencies to do that? And that's the issue with things like Odoo and these low-code softwares is they target small to medium-sized businesses that may have 1-2 IT people, right? And that isn't going to work for a system like this. So let's see. Why do integrators ever do a proper discovery and talk to the people who use the software first? I think because that's not essentially their job. And this is the biggest thing that is misunderstood about system integrators is what is their role, right? Their role is to technically plug in, implement the software, right? Do they care if the software actually works? I mean, probably, right? They probably care about that. But contractually, they are just scoped to make sure they understand how to technically implement the software. So they're not going to spend a ton of time like we do, right? A lot of times chasing the people that need to be the end users. Because some end users in these conversations do not want to talk to. Like they're not interested in talking about this technology thing, and so they'll talk to a manager and they'll be like, well, the manager told us this thing, when in reality that's probably not how the end user is using that software. I mean, those are my favorite conversations to be in, where you have a production manager laying out a process and then the frontline staff is like, yeah, Stuart, we haven't done it that way for 3 years because we can't mess around with all your crazy 12-step software programs. We've got to get product out the door. So we come back in, we implement or we input all of that at the end of the day. And the production manager's like, what? And the staff was like, what do you want me to do? Like, so I got to get the product on the trucks. That's my job. So I think that's the biggest issue. They either do that, or a lot of times I see them try and open-end discovery. And what that gives them the opportunity to do is have discovery for their sales process the entire time. Oh, we didn't know you needed that custom integration. Thank God we've been in discovery for 4 years and we've now figured that out. And again, no, Stuart, no. You do your discovery and then you move on. Right? So there's 2 layers of that. But if you are not managing them effectively, it is not essentially their job to figure out how your software works. It's your job. And that's the hardest part about this. Should they support you in doing that? Yeah, they should be a good partner with good integrity, but contractually, they are not required to do that. And that's why you got to manage them. You got to watch them. Right? So if they're not giving you documentation, they're not giving you updates, or it sounds sketch, that means there's a problem with the implementation and they don't want to tell you that. And so that's a big a big issue, but really good questions. So Odoo's biggest problem today, at least for my client, is me. Good. Let us know how it goes, really, you know. I mean, I like Odoo. I like Fabian. I think he's great. I think he's built a really interesting product, but I do think that it's sold wrong a lot of times. It's sold as like this easy to use type of software. It might look beautiful, right? Certainly doesn't look like, you know, JD Edwards, where she's old, she's broken, she's dusty, but she works, right? So the SI is for a for-profit entity, right? So you can't expect them. So you cannot expect them to go above and beyond their job. And I think that's what is misunderstood, especially if they sold you that software in the first place. They're trying to get paid. Their business model is to implement and then leave so they can go to the next implementation. There's not a level at which they are responsible for it working in your organization. And that's the hard part. Like, we see that with a lot of lawsuits because we have a whole expert witness practice because of our independent stance in the marketplace. Like, we work on the biggest failures, and then we come and lawyers will pay our team to say, like, what do you think happened in this litigation? And we'll have to say, like, you know, well, the SI really didn't have to do that. And the client, yeah, it sucks that they ghosted them and left them with this hot mess, but it is absolutely not contractually their fault, and that sucks. I love paying vendors to do their beta testing in production. Absolutely. And I'm confident with one of our remediation clients, that's what happened. It's wild the amount of testing that was missed because it makes no sense, right, for everything to work in testing, no critical errors. But when we put it in production, everything breaks. Something's missing there. We're either testing wrong, and then where's the testing documentation so we can go through it and see where all of this root cause is. They you know, they don't do anything like that. So that's a big issue, right, in the marketplace. And so when we talk about independence, right, what you need to do in these conversations is that contract with the SI is going to be one of the most important, if not the most important. I would rather you get your contract together with the SI to make sure it's your benefit than the vendor, because they're going to make or break this implementation for you, and they make it seem like, oh, we're just here to help, we're here to, you know, like the friendly mechanic that all of a sudden your transmission doesn't work and you're like, weird, because it worked when I brought it to you and now all of a sudden it doesn't work and you need to be paid to fix it, when, you know, I'm pretty sure you broke it. But that's kind of how that works. So the other thing, while I'm on my system integrator soapbox here, is when you are interviewing them, right? Because that's what you should be doing, right? Is interviewing them, not just being like, oh yeah, this guy does this, so I'm going to bring him in and blah, blah, blah. No, we're interviewing them to see if they're a good match for our company. Remember, the people you are talking to in those initial conversations, those are salespeople. Fine, whatever. They have a role in the organization. Get it, right? But we want to talk to the delivery team, right? We want to talk to the delivery team to make sure that we're going to jive with them. And they're going to give you a line like, well, we can't promise you these resources, and that's fair, right? Like, we're not trying to be unreasonable. We're not crazy, right? But we can talk to like a director of delivery or understand what that looks like. They do exist. Like, we will be talking to someone in delivery before we sign anything with you, right? Would you say it's smart then to hire a production manager type role internally to manage the build? Like for an Odoo product, is that what you mean? If you're going to build versus buy, right? We have these conversations all the time. We just had this conversation with a bigger public sector entity yesterday. Oh, okay. So for Odoo. Okay. So I would say so when it comes to Odoo, the system architecture role, so the system architect, solution architect, enterprise architect, whatever you want to call it, becomes absolutely critical. And that's why that's really hard for small to medium sized business, because that is a high skill position that's going to cost you, 200K, right? To have someone in there that essentially does that. So that's what that role is responsible for, is making sure all of those Odoo systems are working together. That's a big, something to bite off for an organization that's, a mid-sized business. So that role becomes very important. So you have an enterprise architect, ideally, right? They're in charge of making sure everything works from an enterprise level. And then you have system architects. So each one is responsible for your different Odoo modules on the front end, on production, on inventory, on all of those. And I'm not saying you need to hire 1,000 of them, but that's ideally how an IT team would operate. Now, another opportunity is a managed service provider. Like, you could outsource that IT help. But as I always just remind you guys, I'm not saying don't, I'm not saying do. I'm just saying know that you're outsourcing the keys to your business when you do that, right? So you're leasing your competitive advantage, right? You're leasing the brain to your business. And I just want you to know that. That doesn't mean it doesn't work for some people, right? We see this all the time, especially I would rather you go with a managed service provider to support your SAP ECC system right now than be rushed to implement S/4HANA because SAP is doing some weird dance about dates, right? So there isn't a mechanism for that. You just need to understand, as we just need to manage the SI, there are some great managed service providers and there are some terrible ones, right? So we've just got to do our due diligence. Let's see, build versus buy is real for sure. And thank you so much for the fan club. I really appreciate that. And so build versus buy, a lot of people think that I'm advocating for build. I'm not at all advocating for build, right? I'm advocating for you to know your business and choose what's right for you, not let somebody else who apparently is a software expert choose for you, right? And so that's going to be the biggest conversation in these types of strategies. Could you build something? Yeah, but take what I'm talking about, Odoo, and times it by about 1 million, right? It is a huge risk to build your own structure. Does that mean that you own everything inside your business? Absolutely. That's super cool. But that means you're required updates, right? You might not have the R&D dollars that, an industry vertical ERP system would be able to do, right? And so that's you might miss out on some technology innovations by not going with this. So when we service an enterprise, again, 1 billion and above, they're never going to build their own system. That would be stupid for them to do, right? And if you're a mid to medium sized business, I just talked to one yesterday because they're a friend of mine, and I often, will consult for these types of things. Even for you guys, if you've contacted me on here, I don't need, hundreds of dollars an hour to talk to you. I will talk to anyone, literally, because that's my mission here, is to make sure that you understand what you're buying. They are set up for Claude. Claude can really help them, right? Because they're small enough, they're agile enough, they're not like a heavy regulated industry where we need a bunch of traceability, but they have the infrastructure to give that a try. That's great. That's awesome. Give it a try, see what it's doing, and make sure that that's something that's real for you. They could potentially build on top of Claude, but again, we're buying Claude. We're subscribing to the, model that's giving us that output, right? So, let's see. Thank you for the heart. I really do appreciate it. I just appreciate you guys watching, and helping me get the word out. Because I do think, and again, a lot of my colleagues are like, okay, hopes and dreams, Kyler, but that's just the way that I am. And I really do think that we're making good change in the industry by making sure that business have access and have the right to just this basic knowledge, right? But having an ERP dictated by your business rules is so nice. I totally agree with that. I mean, that's why I want you to spend a year getting your business rules in place. a year doing your data, a year doing your processes, and a year really understanding what you need, so you can go into these sales conversations like the battle that it is, right? With solid requirements that nobody's going to come in and say, well, you should really be doing this, or you should really be doing this, because that's the AI of the future, and you need agents to handle that. Right? If you want agents to handle that, cool. If you don't, who cares, right? You know what you want to buy, and that's something that is so, so important. It also, I think requirements gathering, it's painful, right? Like, I'm never going to lie to you, but it's certainly a good, healthy business discipline. Can you, as an IT team, as a project management team, go in and understand what the business needs and excavate that out into requirements? I've seen a lot of the relationships we talk about of like IT doesn't like me, or I don't like IT because the business healed in that scenario, because they really just didn't understand the other's role. Like, a lot of times, I'll give you an example. One time we're in a requirements gathering workshop, and we're like, okay, well, just tell us what you do. So they're like, okay, well, we have to export this report and spend 8 hours reformatting so it's the format that finance needs. And then finance is like, wait a minute, you spend 8 hours reformatting that? We spend 8 hours deconstructing that report because it's not at all in the format that we need it. And then it's just that moment where everybody looks at each other being like, oh, you were just trying to help me. Like, we were just trying to do the best work we could possibly do, but we weren't, able to communicate in that way. And I think that's so important when we're getting business requirements, because again, it will show us, do we actually need new software, or do we just need more collaboration across the business? I don't know, right? Only you can answer that. And that's going to be a big consideration when you're going to really understand what this looks like. But that's going to be the biggest source to independence, so that way you can get your demo scripts ready to go. And let's talk about demo scripts for a little bit. So when you go in to buy SaaS, any SaaS, you should be seeing it before you buy it, right? Even if your, executive was on the golf course at Augusta and decided that they were going to buy this, the best thing to kind of dilute that hype by is like, awesome, let's schedule some time to see it, because I can't wait, right? And kind of Jedi mining trick them into, this software is actually a piece of shit, and I'm going to show you why, right? Seeing it with real data, excellent point. Your data, right? The data that you want to see, what you want to see done. And that's where I see a lot of people go wrong in these demo scripts. So a demo script is like a script for a movie, right? It's giving these vendors exactly what you want to see. I want to see A, B, and C with real data in real time. If they start to bring out the PowerPoint, just ask them to leave. Even if they buy you lunch, all right, you can let them buy you lunch. And then after lunch, tell them to leave, right? Because PowerPoint, that's not it. That's embarrassing at this point, right? So we want to see that, and we want to see these types of things. And you'll see in the demos, right, where they start to be like, let me show you this newer feature that is on the roadmap for later this year. And it's like, sure, show me it, but don't take more than 5 minutes on it, right? And I want to see what works for me on my version and what that will really look like. So that's going to be a huge, huge need. If you go to the vendor or your SI, right, which you really shouldn't have yet if you don't know the software, again, and you say, well, what are you, like, you write the demo script and I'll take a look. So dangerous, huge risk, because they're going to show you what they want to show you, not what you need to see as a business. And it's easy. Again, I can just remind you guys that in tech sales, in these types of conversations, these salespeople are the best in the world. They're the best in the business because they make the most money here. And right now is even more of a risk in these conversations because we've got this SaaS apocalypse conversation where they're terrified that they're not going to be relevant anymore because they need this type of AI right? To appease their shareholders, to appease their stock prices. So their way to do that is heavily incentivize their salespeople to sell you AI agents, right? At every turn in the system. Like I was just at a conference and I saw Oracle's HCM on architecture map. They had agents at every damn turn of that. The only thing I see, not innovation, is dollar signs. Not at all saying those agents don't work for you. I'm just saying we want to try the agents before you just show us this map that has 17 agents in it. Which brings me right to the last piece of knowing what you're buying, and that is the hybrid pricing that comes in these. The hardest part is putting up with the pitch and not falling for the sale. Absolutely. And I mean, even sometimes in the industry, I'm like, wow, that's so cool. We should definitely go with it because they're just so good at it, right? And that's why we got to keep them. And that's why a lot of people have us in the room for demos because we're saying, yeah, Stuart, super cool. Can we circle back? Right? To what we need to be talking about here so that we can really see this specific core functionality, right? I hear agents and I'm immediately put off. I think everyone is at this point. I mean, I certainly am. And so when we look, let's just take the Oracle HCM example, right? When we look at something that's a system, so human capital management is the system I was taking a look at. And within this, they had to have over 30 agents. And that's fine, right? An Oracle system is a big system. It's very robust. But we have to remember, how are we paying for that, right? And a lot of people are kind of in this Copilot hangover right now because they're realizing how much these agents actually cost. So we pay for the license subscription, right? And then all of a sudden, we get these invoices for usage and tokens that our agents are using, even if they're not doing anything. Right? If we're not using them, we're still getting that additional fee for AI agents that we didn't ask you for agents, Oracle. We asked you for an HCM system. We didn't need all of these agents. Well, too bad. That's what's in the system now. And that's how they catch you in their core products, by putting these agents in there, right? And so that's why we're watching things like annual renewals, right? What are we now paying for in our products that we already own? And they're infusing all of these AI-driven workflows in there. And you're like, okay, well, I didn't order AI-driven workflows. Like, right, it's going to McDonald's, getting, your order and then 15 others and then being like, oh, by the way, you owe me $100. And it's like, no, I didn't order all of these hamburgers. You put them in my car unwillingly to me, right? You forced these upon me. And that's how it's working right now. So we've got to be extra vigilant on those renewals because, again, we're following the money. We have economic awareness on this channel. We know why they're doing this because I'm glad you like the McDonald's analogy. Those of you that know me in real life, that are my friends, know I would sooner die than eat McDonald's. So that was a rough one for me. So that's going to be a big understanding, right? Those new functions are nasty. They really are. And they just slide over the annual renewal. The other thing is maintenance fees. Right, we had a client just recently that was on a huge 25-year relationship with this legacy vendor. And in the vendor's contracts that nobody could find, happens all the time, again, over $1 billion business here. So these are big businesses. In the contract that we read and scanned, it said in there that they cannot increase maintenance fees over 6% year over year. This client had been getting charged 20% maintenance fees increases for the last 5 years. And they just paid it because they thought, well, why would they, lie to me about this? Of course, it's going to cost more, we're using more, and maybe it should have, but they didn't know that was in the contract. And when we told the vendor that, I've never seen a vendor get on calls faster than that, because essentially the client could come after them for breach of contract. Did we need to get nasty? No, because the vendor did what they were supposed to do and they fixed it and they showed up. And, you know, there's good vendors out there that will say, you know what, that was our mistake. It's our bad, right? We're not perfect. Nobody's asking them to be perfect, but we will show up and tell you the truth and, you know, do what we need to do. In that, you gain our respect, right? Not everyone in these types of relationships are perfect, but you got to tell the truth. If we were doing something wanky janky and saying like, you know, we charged that because of this provision that was hyperlinked in there and blah, blah, blah. And they, you know, we're doing shady shit like changing the contract in real time. Then we'd have to look at, is this a good partnership for us to go into? And so for agents, right, that's when we have to understand that like we're pre-sold, not the hyperlinks. I know if someone puts a hyperlink in a contract, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, do not hyperlink in contracts. My favorite thing that they've been doing recently is we redline the contract and then they send an updated DocuSign link. And it's like, bro, like, is this your first day on earth? Right? We don't know what you changed, right? It's still got to go through legal. Again, billion-dollar enterprises, right? This is not like an HVAC company from Ohio. Not that you should treat them like that anyway, right? But show what you changed, you big weirdo, so that they know what that is. Stop being like sneaky about it and thinking that like, oh yeah, we did all this and we didn't tell you what we changed. Like, that's not how we operate. There has to be a baseline of respect between the two, right? Seriously, I asked them that straight up. Is this your first time ever doing this? Because if it is, that's cool. But this is not how this works at all. And you're a lawyer, for God's sake, right? So we had to sick our SaaS attorneys on them, and those ladies are scary. They're some of my favorite people in the industry, but they do not play when it comes to that type of stuff. If you've ever had to write a letter to a vendor, like the attorney wrote it, and then I have to like, even me, have to like bring it down a notch because we're not ready to go nuclear, right? I get you want to go nuclear, you crazy, spicy lawyers over here, but we're not, we still got to work with them on this level because nobody's going to benefit when you have a terrible vendor relationship. Nobody's benefiting from that. And we just need that technology to get plugged in, work, and they can leave, right? It's never ideal to rip out an implementation. So for the token prices, things we need to be looking at is like, are we pre-buying tokens? And then do we understand how to have visibility to our usage? Because there's a totally different, level at which are we using these agents? Like maybe they are working for us, but maybe like, most right now, especially if you're having agents talk to other agents, is we have, 40 agents in this agent network. And then all of a sudden, agent 2 gets it wrong. And then the other 38 have it wrong. So we need to be able to trace back to like, where was this agent that messed this up so that we can go fix everything? Are we spending more time doing that? And remember, like all of those agents, you're getting charged for their outputs, right? So even if they're shitty outputs, right? So, it's like, it's like a pricing structure we've never seen. And that's why so many people are accidentally getting charged millions of dollars for their AI agents or their AI systems that they had no idea that they even cost that much, right? And so I think that's such a huge issue that we'll continue to experience because they will push that as far as it goes until the industry as a whole checks them to be like, hey, so we're not going to have imaginary usage limits in here, right? Because how they trap you, and Copilot is a great example of this. Copilot is not an AI model, right? It shuttles a bunch of different answers throughout the organization. It's a collaborative agent, right? Pulls a little from here, pulls a little from Claude, pulls a little from OpenAI, pulls a little from there, and it can be very effective as long as you know what the tool is supposed to do. So if we're doing something like getting every employee that has a Microsoft Outlook account a Copilot license, we don't need to be doing that. Not every user needs access to this collaborative agent, right? Because they don't need to be able to do that. And then we have some people that we've paid, all this money to have the licensing fee, and then they're not using it, right? They're scared of it. They don't like it. It freaks them out to have them pop up. Like, they're from the Clippy generation, like me, where it's like, I would just like Microsoft to stay the hell out of my business. That would be great. So I could just do my job without Clippy being over here like, blah, 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 blah. Like, we're scarred from that. We have PTSD from that. So now Copilot is that on like steroids, right? And you can't turn it off. It's almost impossible to turn off. So say you go the whole month and you're like, weird. Okay, so 50% of our licenses aren't being used. So we'll just tell Microsoft to turn those off. Wrong. They're not going to do that. No, you already signed the agreement for 3 years, right? That you're going to pay for these. So now you've got this waste over here, millions of dollars of waste. And then on the flip side, you have people that are using the generative features for everything, right? They have a fight with their mom or their dog and they need to talk about it on Copilot. And then we have this massive therapy sessions about how Stuart was mean to them from accounting and blah, 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 blah. And so we have all of this excess output coming out and nobody has any idea what is actually being used to make the, revolutionary new collaborative synergy, fusion, digital co-working, or whatever stupid buzzword you need to mean. It's not as easy as that. It's messy, right? So then all of a sudden we've got waste for Copilot. We've got overusage of Copilot and probably a lot somewhere in the middle. But you as an organization have pushed Copilot. You're like, this is the working of the future. We gave you guys this because we know you want AI. And oh, by the way, you can't use OpenAI, which is completely weird because Copilot uses OpenAI, right? But OpenAI is not secure. We've got too many people putting our P&L reports and ChatGPT. We can't use that anymore. We're restricting this. We have an AI policy. We're a grown-up business. So we're going to use Copilot, which is the same sort of thing, but because it has a Microsoft brand on it, people think that it's more secure. It's certainly not, right? A lot of people can tell you that in the cybersecurity industry. So then all of a sudden you have pushed it, and then Microsoft, even if you put a usage cap in your contract, which you absolutely should, right? They come in, they're like, hey, you've reached your usage cap, but you can't turn it off because you've just pushed it on all of these people. You've had trainings, you've had town halls, you've had all of these different hype around. Now you have this collaborative agent. And oh, by the way, you can't use any other AI, and we're an AI first company, but what are you supposed to do? Turn it off? No, right? That would be a change management nightmare, right? And then it's working in the background. So the thing that I'm trying to convey to you with this story is that this gets out of control so fast, right? And we don't know what we're spending, and we're at every becking call of the vendor. The vendor has all the control, and now our business has none, right? And so again, this is not like a fear-based thing to be like, hey, you should be scared of AI, you should be scared of collaborative agents. All that I'm asking you to do is understand what you're buying. That's it, right? Scenario it out. Take your time. Just because it has a big brand name doesn't mean that it's a good choice for you. I mean, on the contrary, most of the most successful implementations that we have are tier 2 vendors all the time, right? When we have IFS, Epicor, Infor, Sage, those Sage is a little too small for what we utilize, but it's also a great company. They're chomping at the bit, right, to get your business and want to show up as a partner. Are they going to be perfect every time? No. But if we can avoid the SAPs, Oracles, and Microsofts, then we don't get trapped in this snowball of a type of thing. And if you're already in there, that's okay, right? There's still things that we can do. But the reason I want you guys to know these types of things is because when we have come into a broken implementation, there's no good options, right? We're looking at all bad options, and it's going to be slow and it's going to be painful because we've got to figure out what's broken, where it is, and we've got to fix it. I took you through our framework of see it, understand it, fix it, guard it, right? And that's going to be the biggest piece of that. So as you're going into these conversations, you've got to be armed with what you want and what you need, right? And really hold true to that before you get taken advantage of by some, bigger SaaS system. And that's the goal for these types of conversations. So I invite you, if you have questions, right? Because everybody's technology strategy is different, then definitely DM me. I have conversations. I've, had 2 yesterday. I have conversations all the time about, what people are doing or situations that they're in. And asking questions is the best way to really see what the best strategy is for you, right? Because a lot of times you can only see what your lens is in the organization. You need someone to kind of come in and take a look at that. So I definitely invite you guys to shoot me some questions. For our live schedule, we'll be live again next week. Our office is closed on Thursday and Friday. If you want any specific videos or you have questions as follow-up to these, I'll be posting those definitely. And then you can always get our lives replayed on LinkedIn and then also on YouTube as well, under my name, so that you can, share them with colleagues. I know a lot of times they're not on TikTok, but I think the goal and the ask is just helping me get this word out. And a lot of times it doesn't matter what I say, right? It matters what's best for your business. And you guys are a huge piece of that, of like, this is working for us, this is not working for us. Being able to share that honestly in a space where nobody's trying to sell you anything. I don't care what you buy, I literally don't. All I care is that you buy what's best for your business. And that's the point of these types of conversations. So I hope you have a safe and happy 4th of July if you're here in the States. And I hope that, you really take these measures to at least start to build the framework of, how you have these conversations, because you're smart enough to do that, right? A lot of times they like to trick you of like, you don't have the industry insight. I do. I worked for Target. Well, good for you. Right? This is our business, and this is something that we're going to take seriously. I absolutely appreciate the honest and casual conversation. Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys. So I will see you next week. Definitely.